Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to tonight's show of Dogman Stories. Your host, Amanda Lawson, and tonight we got an awesome show. Also, I'd like to apologize for being late. I've been working on this show for days, and I just feel like I haven't got it right. And this guest deserves the best show that he can possibly get, just like all my other guests do. I think it's an electronic problem, but electronics are crazy. Anyway, for tonight's show, it's going to be a little different. I'm going to share some great stories with you guys, and many of you may have already heard them in a different place, or you may have read them. But here's the awesome part about these stories. They are stories from a book called Werewolves Encounters with the Black Dog by Joedy Cook. That's right, Joedy Cook. So I've spoken with Joedy Cook many times about Dogman, basically, and I've learned a lot. He's a very good mentor and a very good person. I've decided that I would like to promote his book on my show because it's an excellent book and you will gain more knowledge about the Dogman subject and you will be scared at the same time, but that's okay because that's a good thing. Also, the book is perfect and it's not long, it's not short, the print isn't too small to read. The topics in the book are presented in a way that you won't forget what you read for a while. It's actually pretty scary to know some of the information he speaks of in his book, but at the same time, it's great knowledge to have. Without giving anything away, I've read many different books from many different authors, and they all cover the same story basically. And when you're trying to research without going out in the field, it kind of gets really boring to read the same thing over and over. Maybe not for some, but for me, it's just the way I feel about it. And when I read Encounters with the Black Dog by Joedy Cook, I never get bored. In fact, I was so interested in the book, it took me 48 hours to finish it. I just couldn't put it down. So tonight, I'm going to give y'all a treat. I'm going to give y'all just a glimpse of what this book is about. I promise, guys, you're going to love it. Also, Joedy would like for me to tell you guys that in April of 2017, the North American Dogman Project Group will be hosting an expedition at Land Between the Lakes. Tickets will go on sale in January of 2017. Now, there are only 25 openings, so if you want to go, you better get signed up for it. And you can go on the website to www.northamericandogmanproject.com, and you can send an email and just let them know you're interested and keep an eye out for tickets when they go on sale. It's a weekend expedition for campers and dogman researchers to get together and share notes, evidence, encounters, sightings, proof, or anything really. And this is at Land Between the Lakes. That's awesome. That's going to be so cool. So you never know what's. It's going to be a great weekend. My husband and I are going. It's going to be really cool. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Now, the ticket prices haven't been set yet, but they will. So don't worry. They'll be affordable, so I don't want y'all worrying about that. Also, before I start reading, I want you guys to go on there and check out the North American Dogman Project website. You can join the website and receive news updates and events, book sales. You can read encounters. You can report a sighting. It's a really neat website to check out. Also, if you would like to purchase the book that I'm going to read to you guys tonight, you can do that at www.northamericandogmanproject.com. You can purchase this book along with many other books by Joedy Cook. They're all great, so you don't have to worry about picking one because every single one of his books are amazing and full of information. Also, they're very affordable, and stuff you haven't even realized yet about the Dogman, you will soon find out. Information that you'll remember because it's good information and not gossip. So for tonight, I'm going to read a few chapters that spread it throughout the book. Also, I want to let everybody know that I do have permission from Joedy Cook himself to talk about his books, share them with you guys, and I'm so grateful that a well-respected, talented author would allow me to have this amazing opportunity to be able to do this. So thank you to Joedy Cook himself and everyone who's involved in making of the book. I would like to thank all of you guys, because without you guys, Joedy nor I would even have this opportunity. So thank you all very, very much. Okay, guys. So, without further ado, this is Dogman Stories, Episode 22, Werewolves, Encounters with the Black Dog. It was back in 2009 in October. I remember the date very well, as it was my 49th birthday, October 10th, 2009. My wife Lisa and I were very fond of camping. Ever since we met, we have camped just about everywhere east of the Mississippi that has a national forest and a nice state park. We decided that since tent camping was a game for younger bones, we entered into the realm of traveling trailers. After looking at many, we decided upon an Airstream. They are really nice and expensive, but we intended to get a lot of use out of it. We got a 25-footer so that we could fit into just about any campground. It has full hookups, but we never really used anything but the electric, and hardly that. Plus, we installed solar panels because we intended to dry camp 100% of the time. We traded in my F-250 and bought an F-350 for the power. It's an old joke among Airstream owners. A $60,000 trailer pulled by a $50,000 truck looking for a free campsite. Well, as I said, we were older now and had more resources and decided to go that way. We embarked on a tour of the East Coast National and State Parks. We sometimes would stay for a week or two, or sometimes spend a day or two moving about, sometimes never unhooking. We both have a lot of camping experience. I was a Boy Scout and also spent a great deal of time hiding and camping, either with friends or alone. I was aware of strange things in the wild, especially at night, but not sometimes in daylight. I found weird places for sure. Daniel Webster Forest in Vermont, the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, the Great Smoky Mountains, to name 3. With my wife, we really experienced nothing really weird, except for maybe with everyday people as it goes. Well, one particular time we decided to go to the Outer Banks in North Carolina. We had no plan per se, and decided to wing it. We traveled slowly, staying at campgrounds along the way, though always state parks, as they seem to be less commercialized and attract less noise. We made our way south and steered toward the coast. After crossing in North Carolina from Virginia, we saw that it was approaching dusk and pointed out the closest park, Pettigrew State Park, near the Punskoing Lakes, NWR on Phillips Lake. As it got dark, we passed through a few very strange dark towns. A few miles before the park, we passed through Creswell. This was another dark town, really dark. I stopped and uncovered my off-road lights and continued. Around a corner was a big house, and as we approached, we saw about 15 to 20 people in the yard in the dark. Before our lights illuminated the scene, it must have been pitch black there. We wondered why people would hang out in the dark like that. They all stopped dead and stared at us as we passed. The last guy said, "Good luck, man." "Uh-oh," I said to no one in particular. So we wend our way down to Pettigrew State Park. Just as the park ranger is leaving, there was only one other camper there, and they were talking. The place was rather muddy and wet after the rain, and there wasn't many trees except by the lake. Just swamp-type scenery. We asked how it was there, and the ranger looked at the other guy, and after looking around said, "Okay, pretty good. I promise to be back at sunrise." He seemed nervous and kept looking around. The other guy did too. We decided to skip it. The other guy said, "You're not staying?" "Well, then neither am I." I'm not doing another night like last night. We laughed and drove toward Roanoke Island, as we figured we would just stay in a store parking lot, as we did often. There were no other parks nearby, and we were not going to the boondocks in the swamp. So we headed down Route 94, crossed the Alligator River, and drove into the middle of Alligator National Park. Okay, having lived in Pennsylvania my whole life and camping mostly in the north, large man-eating lizards were kind of new to me, and I felt uneasy at the reality of a predator without any real personality. To me, they seemed like eating machines with a real disregard to what the prey might be. A reptilian view? Not my thing. Okay, well, while we drove through the night and looked up the park on our phones, amazed that we even had enough signal, we read about the red wolf, a critically endangered species that was very rare. It was reintroduced to this park a few years back, but no one had seen one in a while. We were almost to Man's Harbor near the ocean bay when we saw a dog calmly walking down the road towards us. He never really looked at us, though I could see a yellowish glare to his eyes. We looked at each other and really couldn't believe it. It really looked like a red wolf. We just read about that. Okay, that was about 1 a.m. when I heard a loud thump on the trailer. Not here. I didn't really want to get out here, but I decided that I should look anyway. I left the truck running, grabbed my .357, holstered it, and walked out. I checked the truck and the trailer and didn't see anything obviously wrong. Just a branch, maybe. Then I saw a dent in the trailer just below the right taillight. I checked it, and while I was looking at it, the hair on the back of my neck stood straight out, and all the insect noises stopped. I had been in the wilds enough to know what that meant. Someone or something was behind or near me staring. Something odd. It felt sort of like a predator, mountain lion, coyote feeling. I slowly turned around and didn't see anything at first. The feeling got stronger, and I pulled the gun out. I saw nothing, but I began to hear rustling and water noises. I focused on the direction of the sound, and I saw a dark shape behind some scrub brushes. As my sight sharpened, I saw a somewhat familiar shape. It seemed like I was looking at one of my German shepherds, although this one was reddish black, very large, with tufts of hair above its ears, which were both facing me. It had its front paws on a rock, and it was crouching behind it. One of the ears was light gray and bent over somewhat. Our eyes met, and I got a chill. That was the look of the hunter with no emotion. It left its left ear, my right, and then moved slowly forward. Then it did something that haunts me to this day. I saw a deer do this once, and I thought I was crazy. It lurched backwards onto its rear legs, and there were two distinct popping sounds as it straightened up. Then I really saw him. He was somewhat muscular above the waist, with the hair like a mange around his shoulders. His hair or fur was very reddish, though dark with black streaks. He had yellow predator eyes, pointed ears, and hand-like paws with fingers and claws on the end of a very long muscular arms. His lower half was thinner with strange canine legs, and I thought that I saw a tail. Wow, this was the stuff of nightmares. Was I really seeing this? It made a noise, a low growling, and then it looked to its left again, and I followed its gaze, and I saw another one. It was really dark, on all fours and moving to my right, a flanking maneuver. Uh-oh, time to go. The one in front of me took another step and showed his teeth. I could see them in the moonlight, glinting in fact. I can still see them right now in my mind. I backed away towards my truck, and I glanced to my right. I still heard the other one, but I couldn't see him anymore. Not good. I reached the truck and I saw that the first one had reached the road and I had one paw with claws on it. I took aim and fired at him. I'm a good shot and I know that I hit his shoulder. As he turned at the last minute, I was aiming at his head because I felt in my heart that a warning shot would do nothing. It amazed me that he did not react to the shot as a human might. He took it like a punch, and I had the distant thought that I just made him angry. He did stop short, though, as did the other one, and I used that time to get in the truck. Honestly, I do not remember getting in. My wife was in a state of panic because of the shot, also because she had never seen me frightened before, and I was shaking. I do not remember putting the truck into gear and taking off. I was moving pretty well, as the truck was very powerful and always made light of an 8,000-pound trailer. I looked in my mirrors and saw one on each side of the road, at least going 30 to 35 miles an hour, and then they slowed and just veered back into the swamp and were gone. I didn't stop or really talk until I crossed the Causeway Bridge and was in Roanoke. I pulled into the Manteau shopping center and stopped. Then I looked at Lisa and told her what I saw. She said she didn't see anything, but admitted that she was looking at her phone when I was behind the trailer. I am so glad that she didn't get out or see them. I don't think that I would have ever gotten her out of the house again. I decided not to go into too much detail because of that, and I told her that it was a warning shot for a predator, or that I told her that I had misidentified. Roanoke Island has its own history for sure. We stayed in a grocery store parking lot that night. Many businesses allow overnight stays by trucks and campers. They figure that you will wake up and shop in the morning, and that's usually what happens. In fact, Walmart and Cracker Barrel have a special parking for trailers, and they ask you to park so that you have the store cameras pointed towards your doors. Okay, so we had an uneventful night. Except for that, I had some really bad dreams of you-know-what. I kept seeing them really clearly, and there were many more in the dream. The thing that kept repeating in the dream and still bothers me to this day, when I think of them, is the actual point in which they stand up. It is a popping sound, like it's an abnormal move that they do anyway. And in fact, their eyes never leave you when they do it. They seem to run faster and quieter on four legs, but seem to shift effortlessly from all four to a half crouch. They seem to have to completely stop to perform the erect stance, and it takes 15 or so seconds to settle in. At least that's what it looks like in my dreams. So I awoke in a sweat, and we went into the grocery store, of course. Everyone was staring at us, but this is not unusual. The truck, the airstream, the circumstances, plus I'm in my 50s, 6'4", 260 pounds, and my hair is past my waist. Though usually braided, we get a lot of looks. It's okay, it never bothers us. It's just part of the adventure. Anyway, after we left, we put the groceries in the trailer. Lisa got in her side, and I was walking around the trailer to my side. I saw the truck in the parking lot, and the driver had me in a dead stare, and I decided it was unfriendly. There were several alternatives that I could have done, but I chose a query. As soon as I began to speak, the guy completely fell apart and started apologizing to me. He said that I was a carbon copy of a friend of his, that he thought he was messing with that guy. We both laughed about it, and I asked him about the island and the surrounding area. He told me that the normal tourist stuff was good, and told me of a couple of good restaurants. I gauged him, looked at the rifle rack in his cab, and then decided to ask about what I saw in the swamp. He rocked back on his heels, as if I had struck him. He looked around and said, "Holy crap, I thought I was the only one." We then proceeded to sit at the table in the camper and talk about it. It seems that he had exactly the same experience twice. His name was Eric. He described them down to a bent gray ear on one of them. Damn, same guy. Eric told me that the first time he had only seen one, but then the second time he saw two, maybe three, and that the second time he shot one. He said he hit it in the chest and it didn't stop at all. Then he hit it again in the leg and it stopped and looked down. Then they all retreated a little bit. But this had to be good to know, I guess. Eric said that they had all displayed hunting behavior. He said that he saw them on the mainland while he was hunting for game. He also said that he doesn't go there anymore. In fact, he said that he used to hunt everywhere in or around the swamp, and it seemed to him that this Dogman thing has only come up within the last 5 to 7 years. I thought the same thing, as I had been all over, seen many predators and other things, but I had never, ever heard of them, although I never really looked for them. Eric agreed with that. Coyotes, bobcats, bear, mountain lion, gator for him, and snakes were all predators we both knew. These dogmen were new and different. He told me that a friend of his is a Bigfoot researcher and that he'd been going out with him. They actually had a good time doing it, and that neither he nor his friend ever felt seriously in danger. The Dogman thing has really put a damper on things. It seems that wherever they are, the Bigfoot phenomena seems to diminish. Well, I bought him lunch and the three of us enjoyed it, and we never mentioned it again. Lisa and I went to Fort Raleigh at the north end, then down to Kill Devil Hills. I wonder now where the name came from. And checked out the Kitty Hawk First Flight area. I began to put the whole thing out of my mind. Being in civilization is real good for that. We just kept the trailer hooked up and we were like hermit crabs for a couple of days. We stayed one more night at Manto and then we drove down to the Outer Banks. What a great place it is. If you haven't been there, you should go. We went between seasons and it was quiet. We finally settled at the Frisco Woods campground. It was closed, but I called the owner and he told me to stay as long as I wanted to, and the electric was on. Very cool. I was sure to leave a nice envelope upon leaving. We unhooked the trailer and set up our camp. It was great as we could see the back bay and the ocean at the same time. We were very much alone and had a nice 3 days and nights. I was weary of alligators and I had those dogmen in the back of my mind. But they didn't seem to be any predators on the Outer Banks. We stayed for a week and then we headed back. Unless you take a ferry, there is only one way off and one way on. Right before we left the area, we dried camped, hooked one more time. We were off of Roanoke and onto the mainland, which I was wary of now. We stayed at a nameless business in Man's Harbor on Old Ferry Dock Road, with permission, of course. We didn't venture out after dark and slept soundly. Before we went in, the owner told us that we should stay inside after midnight, though, and said nothing more. He didn't have to tell me. Man's Harbor wasn't far from the encounter place. In the middle of the night, I got up for a pee break and decided to look outside. It's never a good idea. Better to leave the blinds down. Anyway, I thought that I heard stealthy movement outside. There was nothing, except that I thought I saw two eyes on the edge of the woods, and the insects stopped again. They were eyes because they blinked twice. They were about 4 to 6 feet up, I'd say, and after a while they were extinguished and gone, and the noise started again. If it had been any other time, I would have dismissed it as a totally normal for the woods, even woods on the edge of town. Now I'm nervous about the woods. A couple hours later, toward dawn, it was silent outside, except for the distant noises, and I woke up again. I saw a dark shape move out of the woods, and it wandered over to look at a rabbit hutch. I was wondering before why the hutch was completely enclosed in heavy fencing. Well, now I know. As I watched, the shape became what I thought to be a dogman in a crouch. I couldn't tell for sure, but it was big and it seemed to have a snout and a tail. It was panting like a dog. It tried to open the fence, but what struck me is that it did not tear at the fence. It stood up on two legs and tried to figure out the lock. It kept looking around, but it was so dark I couldn't really see it well. Once, right before it dropped back down and went back into the woods, it looked right at me through my window. I swear that it saw me because I got that ice-pick feeling in my stomach. In the morning we woke up, thanked the man, and set off hitting the road. There was no sign of the creature or creatures anywhere. The guy saw me looking around, and he looked at me knowingly but said nothing. When I started to say something, he put his finger against his nose. I knew that to be the British equivalent of putting your finger to your lips. I nodded, and we got in the truck and drove away. I wished that there was another way to the highway, but all roads seemed to lead deeper into the back country. As it was, I drove on Route 64 towards Route 32 back to the Great Dismissal Swamp, Suffolk, and eventually to North Fork. A few times I half fenced that I saw a few tall creatures running along with my truck a ways back in the Virginia swamp. When I slowed and looked harder, I saw nothing. Right before we left the swamp, I stopped and looked back. I swear that I saw a dogman in the swamp watching me leave the area. This experience has made me much more aware of my surroundings, and I now know to look over my shoulder, and I examine the woods thoroughly at all times. I guess that's a good thing, and I thought that I was doing that, but I guess I wasn't. I researched this phenomenon for a long time. It would seem that I have opened myself up to the other side. I think that I might have brushed up against him in the Blue Ridge Mountains, at the Meadows of Dan, and again in the Great Smokies. After a while, I got brave enough to tell my story to my two best friends. They teased me a little bit, but knew me well enough to know that I was serious, and then we all talked about it quite a bit. One of them spends a lot of time in the outdoors, and his property backs up to a large wooded area on the outskirts of Lake Nakamixon, somewhat near Philadelphia. He hesitantly started to tell me about some strange occurrences on his property. He said that he wanted to tell me about it now due to the story that I had just told him. He thought that people would think that he was crazy, but now he felt comfortable enough to say something since he thought I might understand. His property is irregularly shaped and is about 20 acres. As I said, it's attached to a large park surrounding a reservoir. The area has a very long history and was once scarce land to a tribe of Native Americans that lived here. In fact, there are stone structures nearby abbreviated to them, and a nearby road is called Top Rock Trail, though he would like to keep his actual address private. So he began to tell me that over the last month or so he had started hearing strange noises at the back of his property. He did not have a large fence. It was just enough to mark the property, really, and to warn hikers of his dogs. His dogs are actually pretty friendly, unless you have a bad intent. So those noises were snarling and a kind of baying sound, like wild dogs, and the shed which he uses to process deer was damaged twice. It wasn't damage that you would expect from humans. It was being clawed and stretched and torn into. He repaired it with strong materials, but whatever was breaking through got in anyway. So he decided to watch from the house with binoculars and see what was disturbing the shred. He figured it was a bear. Bears were extremely rare in the country, but not completely unheard of. It could be wild dogs too, but he didn't think they were strong enough to break his repair. When he first started watching, nothing happened. One night the surrounding forest noises just stopped and his dogs started acting strangely. They were usually alert and ready to go out. They had their heads down and their tails between their legs and went down into the basement and refused to go out or come upstairs. He was watching the shed with the binoculars and he thought he saw a shadow move in the back. As he watched and felt very uneasy himself, he swore he saw a wolf-like creature walking on two legs near the shed. He shook his head to clear it and looked again. He said the sight of this thing scared him more than anything he could remember, and that he thought that maybe there was more than one. He considered going out with a shotgun, but thought better of it. The next day he went out to the shed, and the dogs seemed normal. He saw no damage to the shed, but he found a very large dog or wolf track, and his dogs wouldn't go near them. After he told me this story, I went out to his house, and during the day we looked at the shed. There were people in the woods walking around, and I had no strange feelings. Everything seemed normal. I looked at the tracks and the shed and saw his apprehension. That night we built a fire and sat out in his backyard and watched the place. Though we saw nothing, there were a couple times during the night that we felt weird, like something was watching. I told him an idea that I had. I told him to start processing the deer off the property. I knew it was a pain, but if he was going to continue living at the great house in harmony with the surroundings, it might be better to avoid attracting attention, especially if a new animal had moved in. I told him to consider what he would do if a bear family was living in the woods. He would take precautions then, right? He said that he agreed, and we washed the shed completely with bleach solution and gave it a new non-food purpose. After that, the visits and the activity stopped. I would not say that they completely disappeared, but they may have moved on. We never felt the presence again, anywhere in the park. I considered him extremely fortunate because I felt in my heart when I had my encounter that the dogmen I saw were part of or attached to the area, that they were going nowhere. Maybe it had something to do with the food and activity. I don't know what I would do if they followed me home. It is strange how one can tell the difference between a Bigfoot, a predator, a human, and a dogman. It holds a kind of terror feeling, like the alligator, but much worse. It's almost like an instinctual fear, but I never really saw it on those 2 trips of mine, and I didn't see it on my friend's property, but my senses told me it was the same feeling as in the Alligator National Park. I have to say that I have that feeling a couple of times in rather small patches of the woods, and surprisingly, once in an urban woodland near my house in Philly. I know that sounds really creepy, but you know when you are being watched, and I know the feeling of the dogman watching now. I had a terrible feeling that maybe these things followed you over long distances, but I decided to dismiss that for my own sanity. We still love to go camping and to be out in the woods, but as I said, I'm always wary, even if I don't tell my wife, as I want her to be relaxed and have a nice time. I am always armed with either .357 or .45, and she is used to that. We tend to stay above the Shenandoah, and we spend a lot of time in Vermont. We actually bought a house there, and I would say that I have not seen or felt anything far north. Past the boreal forest, there is a bear and moose, but nothing else to be seen. Maybe it's the cold weather. Thanks for tuning in to Dogman Stories, episode 22, part 1. Tune in tomorrow for episode 22, part 2. Thank you and good night.